everybody. Welcome back to the Primas podcast. I am Cindy. Hey. And that's my prima, Jess.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again.
We have a super duper hot topic today. Psychology 101 with the Primas. We are talking about social conformity. Burr, 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 burr.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be so exciting. I can't wait to get into it. Okay.
Yeah, we kind of got this idea.
That's when I get nervous.
We had this idea because at the end of last week's episode, Cindy, even though we were talking about, what were we talking about?
Cults.
You just started going on a new topic. I was like, whoa, Prima, wait, this is a whole different idea. Let's save it for next week. So here we are talking about it.
Yeah. Although social conformity has a lot to do with explaining cult behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought it would be cool to give different examples of what social conformity is in case, I don't know, I just think it's fun to see how humans interact and why they do, like to explain their behavior. And this particular social conformity has to do with how humans behave in groups and in society.
Correct.
And what type of impact that has on our behavior, because it has a big one.
It does. It sure does. Do you want to give away the definition and then we'll just roll with it?
I don't really have a definition. Should we just give what we know about what it is? I don't have like a Google definition, but I feel like you're going to look it up.
I thought I had it up.
Well, social conformity is when people act a certain way based on who's around them. It could be in society. I have a bunch of different examples to show like the obvious times that we conform. And it's not a bad thing to conform socially. It's when you think of a library, for example, it's nice and quiet. People kind of know that we conform to that rule. And so that's not a bad example. So yeah, I wanted to start off by saying that it's just kind of like the impact other groups and society has on our behavior. Okay. And sometimes though, we can conform in a way that isn't very helpful.
All right. I got a good definition on simplypsychology.org. Conformity is a type of social influence involving a change in belief or behavior in order to fit in with the group. So that's a good, simple definition, right? I think
I just said that.
Key word where you missed was influenced. It influenced.
I feel like I said that word, to be honest with you. I'm not going to lie.
All right, let's rewind. Yeah, rewind it.
It's on my notes, social influence.
Okay. So yeah, that's it. And so I want to start with saying like the most, I remember it happened to me, but I didn't know it happened to me until after. And I was like, shoot, I fell into it, you know? I remember learning about like social conformity maybe in like high school. And then when I went to college, you know how for professors, they had office hours. So if you wanted just that one-on-one with the professor, if you just wanted to touch on a subject that you weren't like familiar with, you utilize those office hours, right, to go. And so I remember one time I went to go talk to my professor during office hours, and I go and there's a line, and I'm like, wow, all of us are here to like talk to him, like, fuck, man. So there was like 10 people in line. You know what I mean? And the setting is not like they all have these huge offices. Most professors even share offices with other, right, professors. So I waited about like 20 or 30 minutes, and I'm like, geez, he never opened the door to like say, okay, bye, student, and let another one in. And then finally he opened the door, and like several other students came out, and they were all laughing. And he's like, whoa, why are you guys making a line? You guys should have just came in. We were all like debriefing in here. And I was just like, I felt like such an idiot for like making that line and not even like going to go knock on the professor's door and be like, you know, I just fell into like social conformity and made line when I didn't even know what this line was for. I just assumed.
Great example.
Yeah. So it's just like, fell for it.
And you assumed because there's been other instances where that's rewarded, like at a restaurant or like King Taco, you have to get in a line to get your food, right? Like we just know to get in lines, and a lot of people didn't question it. Versus someone just, let me go see what the hell is up. I've been waiting up, like nothing's happening. Yeah. Good example.
Yeah. I know, I always think about that. So ever since then, even in those lines, Prima, I always ask. I never fall in line in fast food restaurants because I'm like, I don't know if they're waiting in line for their food and they've already placed an order, or they're waiting in line to make an order, because everyone just usually just follows each other. So I'm always like, what are you here for? What are, like I'm that person.
Well, King Taco has signs though. It says like order here.
Oh yeah.
So I'm assuming that line. But you're right, and like after not making progress, some people will just stay in the pressure, like no one else is saying anything. And there you are just starving and like it's closed and like no one's, So yeah, that's a good example too.
Yeah.
So evolutionarily speaking, is that a word? Evolutionarily?
Heated of.
Yeah, sure.
Tongue twister. The reason why we do conform to society and to the groups that we belong to is because I saw this video where they took us way back to like the caveman times, where the big predators were like, just, I don't know, lions or whatever existed back then. And dinosaurs. Dinosaur, like T-Rex and stuff. And so humans started to kind of evolve like, oh, we're the prey. And so we're big, they started to evolve and organize, and they became bigger in numbers. And so it was just kind of like a movement where for protection, like we're bigger in numbers, we're bigger if we do kind of comply and not act violently. And so a lot of that compliance, those social behaviors that we adapt is because it's an evolutionary trait. It's like, oh, okay, we feel more comfortable when we feel a sense of community. Now we don't have to defend ourselves from like predators, I guess, in that sense. But yeah, so I was like, well, that's a cool explanation, because I always thought, I get where it comes from. Like we have to also be agreeable to a certain extent. We have to make sure that, right, to be successful in life, you have to be not non-agreeable, because people who are just always like, no, it's my way or the highway, or just like condescending, then like their behaviors or their relationships won't go great. They'll have better chances if they can negotiate, have like a more natural, like, all right, let's give and take. Correct. Whether I want to or not, that's going to be a huge benefit to me, right? If I can just find some sort of negotiation between someone or what I want.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to bring out. Like we're talking like millions of years ago, how we evolved, right? And we are stronger in numbers because as part of the animal like world, we don't have like sharp teeth. We don't have like big claws to fight off predators, but we do have those numbers. And that is like for the evolutionary, like you said, for the next offspring to be that much stronger is like that sense of that, to have that community network, because we're social beings, we thrive in that community environment. And like you said, for the safety of the entire group, we are just stronger in numbers, since we weren't, we didn't evolve to have these like poisonous like tongue where we can spit poison, like,
You don't have that? I could do that.
As other animals have.
Yeah, and the other big difference between our species is that we do have the ability, because of our cognitive abilities, because of our brain capacity, we can plan. We have memory, right? Like, so we can remember, at least in those like cave times, like, oh, last time I approached them in this way, half my village got killed, or whatever, right? Like you have that memory where other animals.
Well, we see it in like the monkey family. We see it in the wolf's family. Those are other like social animals that have packs for that reason,
Yep, and they've had to learn how to.
We see them in whales and dolphins, like orcas, so in different environments, we see a lot of animals roll in packs because it's just like, it's, necessary.
And it's part of our as well, like our superpower in nature, right? We all have different superpowers. there's this great show on PBS Kids called Wild Kretts, and they always talk about, they go into a species and they're like, this is their superpower. And sometimes it's digging to survive underground, you know, like all of these cool abilities. So yeah, I think maybe, I don't know, like species that do have to survive in packs might be a little bit above in the food chain, right? Or like they just have different abilities where they're able to get along. And I don't know, we're getting into like the animal world and it's really fascinating, but I'm like, I don't know.
I was just gonna say, last part of this is like, I just saw year one again.
Wolves.
But last thing, okay, I just saw year one again because it's on Netflix and I love that movie and I reference it all the time. But having that, like, some people are gatherers and some people are hunters.
And Jack Black is a gatherer.
No, Michael Cera.
Oh, Jack Black is given a chance and he's kicked out. He sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. Okay. Now we're done. So let's move on to modern days in like observing social conformity, right?
Yeah. And real quick, I just want to make that connection where Jack Black in that movie didn't conform into his tribal village ideas. So that's a great example of how sometimes he wanted more, right? He's like, there has to be more to this.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, no, this is it, bro. It's so funny. That's a great movie to explain social conformity. Where he's like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. And it resulted that he made it. How does the movie end, right? Like he frees his friends?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes it could work to not be too obedient and not think for yourself. Okay. So some of the ones that I wanted to say was like when we're in public transit, like when we're on a bus, in a train, on a plane, even in traffic, like parking, we socially conform without someone having to tell us. Like we just kind of know how to behave in certain places. And that's an example of social conformity. Do you have any examples? I did want to bring up like the 2 cool experiments. They're not cool.
Yeah,
but, they are. They're big in psychology.
Yeah, I think they're really funny. I hope we're talking about the same ones. But which one?
Milgram's experiment.
The obedience?
The one with the shock?
Yeah, that's obedience. That's not conformity.
It's still it's under the same, but that's still the same thing though, because you're falling under authoritative pressure. You're saying under these rules, I'm going to conform. So it is the same thing, I feel. It's just a different way to look at it, right?
Well, that has to do with ranking. So like, I mean, you just gave the example of the metro stop, which we're all on the same page. And like my example was the students, we're all on the same page. But when it comes to obedience, there has to be a higher authoritative influence, which is a little different than I think like the normal quote unquote social conformity, like in that context.
No, I think it's just, but I don't think it's different because it helps explain the different ways that we will conform. Like, well, it's the same idea. Like, okay, so the sports game that happened in Mexico, where everybody, it was the same thing. They felt that pressure to behave in a way that they wouldn't have done. They wouldn't have conformed had it not been for certain factors. And I think authority is a factor, being a fan is a factor, so I don't know. I feel that they're the same. It's just a different explanation of the different ways we conform in society. Because like cops, for example, they're part of society and we know how to behave with them.
That's obedience. Yeah. So that's
but still we function in society with law enforcement and with authority. So I would say it's still a part of social conformity. Should we arm wrestle? This?
Okay, we'll go with it. No, my 2 experiments were, I really like the Solomon Asch. I think I'm saying his last name correctly. And I remember a lot in school when we would learn about him, I really gravitated toward these experiments because it's just like you said, in everyday things that we kind of don't question, we just kind of roll with it. And it is like going to the metro stop, like reading that context. When we walk into a library, we all just know to like not use our elevated voices, but to like whisper. And I like how he defined it. And I think what started all these experiments in the 1950s was the most like infamous one. Did you ever learn about Kitty Genovese?
Yeah, but wait, the people you were talking about previously, what was that experiment?
Yeah, those are all social conformity. So that's what I'm gonna get into, because if it wasn't for the Kitty Genovese thing that happened in the early 60s, then Solomon Asch wouldn't have conducted all his social conformity experiments. What happened to Kitty Genovese in the I believe it was in like the early 60s in the Queens, New York. Did you ever hear about her?
Yeah.
So they call that the bystander effect, which everyone around her heard her screams and cries, and she was being like killed, stabbed, and raped, and no one did anything. Everyone like just assumed someone else was going to do something about it. And I think out of 37 witnesses, no one called the cops. No one did anything. So that's an interesting, like, for that to happen. And then this psychologist, Solomon Asch, was like, wait, why didn't anyone, right, call the cops? Why didn't no one help her? But because they all just assumed someone else was going to do it, they identified like her study called the bystander effect. And then so he started running all these social conformity experiments, because those 37 people essentially conformed into like just stepping back and not doing anything. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Which is really interesting and like crazy, because yeah, we think like if we saw anyone get harmed or if anyone was in danger, we would assume, oh, I'm at least call the cops, right? I think it is interesting to not have that aspect where 37 people didn't do anything. So then it rolled out all his social conformity experiments. And my favorite one is the one where he did in a classroom setting, which is he asked people to like, he put the lines like, this is the line. And he said, A, B, and C, which one correlates with this one, right? And then he conducted his experiments that way. And it was like he had confederates, which is people who know about the experiment and are there to influence the behavior of the participant, who the participant does not know anything about the study, right? They think they're all part of the study, which they're not.
They're actors in a sense.
In a sense, yeah. So the actors would be given and told to lie and say the correct answer is B, but they would all say, no, the answer is A. So when it came to the participants' time, even though he saw like it was blatantly clear the answer is A, he would say, no, the answer is, he would know the answer is B, but he would say, no, the answer is actually A. And that's social conformity, because the influence of all the others were like, no, the answer is A, even though you know the answer is B, you still said the answer is A. And they did it time and time. They would move that participant and bring in other people. And so many people would, like, I think out of 10 people, 9 would say and conform with the group. There'd be like that one participant that said, no, the answer is B. Like, what's wrong with you guys, you know? But like 9 out of 10 times, that's a high number of like social conformity, right? Like in data research.
Yeah. And what did he conclude from that behavior?
That the impact, the more there is in like a classroom setting, the higher the influence. So I think he did it with like 4 participants in total, and then he did it with like a class of 30. And the more the people that said the wrong answer, the easier like the influence was. So that's another huge like factor. The more, the bigger the group, the easier the influence, if that makes sense.
So the more people doing something, it's like, well, they have to be right. I'm the one that's wrong.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I was gonna say the Genovese one, that's still happening. Like in New York, like in their train station or they're in the subway or whatever, like a lady got raped and like in front, and people were just watching. You haven't heard of that?
No.
Yeah, there was like a few, yeah. And that was the lights on, and people were just like, nah, I'm not getting involved. And so that still kind of shows, right? Like how much influence someone like a group has over your own behavior. Because, and what I like about the psych experiments is that in the one with the lines, there's a lot of controls. So you said controlled, meaning that the actors are controlled, like the environment as controlled as possible. Sometimes it goes as far as age, gender, so that they can, right, like get different results. Like, well, how does a female in this age group react? Do we have the same behavior repeating itself? Males. So when you said they're in a classroom, the experiment is done in a classroom setting. And so the way that people, I think it's cool the way that people are targeted for like being volunteers in experiments. Everything has to be a lie and it has to be believable. And so a lot of experiments are done on college campuses. Like we would have to like participate in our classmates' experiments, and it was really hard for psych students because we already knew something was up. But even still, there's so many different ways to manipulate situations. And so I think that's cool because there's a lot of experiments like that where there's a lot of actors, and then they'll place one person and everything's running as it should, but it's all a play. And it has to be as natural as possible so that they can get the most rawest form of behavior. And time and again, we see that. I don't know if it's because I studied psychology, but I don't feel like I'd fall into it as easy because I know what's going to happen. And so it's like, fuck, now I got to step up. Or, in a safe environment. I don't know, I'm not saying like in any situation, but like with the lines thing, I was like, because I was shown that in school and I'm like, no. I call them out like, no, you guys, what's going on here? Like we all can see. But again, I don't know if it's my bias because I'm already walking into a room, into a setting, like analyzing everything, because you're like, this is meant to produce a certain behavior. Therefore, I'm going to be conscious of it and catch myself. But we conform all the time, right? Like in restaurants.
Yeah, 100%. I think us studying psychology, because I remember one professor said, like, once you study psychology, you're going to question everything and your life is forever going to be changed. And I think
it's going to ruin your life.
Yeah. In a good way. Yeah. Because it does make us question everything, And when I explained, like, when I had fallen into social conformity in that line, I was in my early 20s. I think I was still like dabbing into like all my other general ed. So I didn't have a full grasp of like social conformity, until I learned about it. I'm like, never again. And ever since then, that's what I said. Even when I go to take out lines, I'm always like, wait, what's going on? What are you? Who are you? Like, I just have to ask a million questions. Because I also too don't trust, like, I don't know. I just feel like everyone is also like low key doing a study on us.
Right. Yeah. For me, I'm not as social in social settings. So I wouldn't ask someone, but you can also detect the behavior by observing. I can tell when someone's insecure. And I'm not saying insecure and like that, like, oh, I don't like how I look. No, I'm talking about if there's a group setting and I'm reading people's facial expressions and they're displaying like, I'm just going along with the crowd, or you can see the people who are secure, which is not many. It's very rare. And you can see the people who are like, just kind of like, well, my behavior is dependent on my friends, and right. Like you can read it.
Yeah.
For me, it's that I don't need once they open their mouth, great. Now I have more information, but you can also sense it. Like you don't have to talk. And I'm sure you're like, nah, what the hell? There's an energy shift, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Body language is a big way in psychology that, right?
Yeah.
You can read
body language. Yeah, definitely. That's influence. Even our facial expressions, our hands, where we keep our hands, like that, like you can tell when someone's uncomfortable without them even talking. So I completely agree. It just makes us like aware, right, of people's energies and like what they're giving off.
Like, okay, so when we started the podcast, I used to talk really fast. And then I would rant. And all of those are horrible, right? Like that's totally beginner. And I learned so much from like, why do I do that? And it's because I was nervous, obvious, but I was just like, no, really, like, how can I be a better speaker for the podcast sake? Like, I get nervous and then like words come out wrong, whatever. And so there's also those behaviors where someone thinks they're appearing to be confident, but then they start displaying, you're like, you're not calm. you have to have such a calm, natural demeanor when you're displaying confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's the opposite of that, and I think that's a really cool ability that the human brain has.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're reading all of these signals, not just psychology majors. Like we're reading all of these things and our brain is decoding them. And it's like, are you safe? Are you not? Like there's just like antennas, but in our brain.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Like sound, perception, everything.
Light. Yeah. Everything.
Okay.
That's a good one. So then, so he did that experiment, which I love to watch and get ideas from. And then the other one was the infamous elevator one, which he called facing the rear, which that one makes me laugh all the time, right? Because he conducted this social conformity experiment with an elevator. So he again had, I believe, 4 Confederates, quote unquote, actors who would enter the elevator after already the participant is there. And then they would all be facing the back. So the door opening was towards the back. And then the participant would already be there. And you can see the participant like, what the hell? Why is everyone facing the back? And slowly but surely, those participants would be turning around facing the rear of the elevator. And I just thought that was so funny because who stands in an elevator facing the rear, but because social influence, it was like one person, all these Confederates would enter and then immediately be facing the back of the elevator, and they look like casual people. They all look like him, like wearing suits, men and women. And then little by little, the participant would like turn around and would do it like halfway.
I know. Like I'm gonna like not sell out 100%.
Yeah. And then some would fully like do a 360. And then I liked it that he added another layer to that experiment. Then he made the actors turn to like the side in unison, and the participant would also turn to the left or right. And I was just like, why isn't he questioning it? Like I would have been like, what is wrong with you people? But I think our bias being in psychology, I would have been like so awkward. I've been like, I'm being tested right now.
I would just be like, I'm not doing it. I already have that natural intention from before psychology of like, whatever most people are doing, I'm going to do the opposite.
I know.
And I question myself because I'm like, why? I'm sure there's we should talk about that. A psychological reason of why there's those outliers. Mm-hmm. I'm not the only one. My mom's like that. She's not even super conscious. I'm conscious of it because sometimes I have to tell her like, Mom, you did this thing that is not natural. It's not normal. It's amazing. But also, and she's just like, fuck, I guess I did. And it's just like years later where I'm like, I wonder where we get those behavior traits from, where it's just, I automatically get so turned off from whatever groups are doing, and I'm like, I'm sure that comes from somewhere,
Yeah. But going back to evolutionary purposes, I think you would have been dead already. Because
100%.
You would
have been burned at the stake. Like, get her the fuck out of here.
Oh yeah. During the witch trials for sure. Yeah. I would have been like, yeah, guys, let's look at Sydney's behavior. This isn't
yeah, and you'd be the one to rat me out because you'd be like, I gotta climb the social power. It's not personal, but you gotta die. Because back then, death was like, you gotta die. Like everything
sacrifice you. Prima, yeah.
Stone her to death. Remember the lottery? Remember that story?
Yeah.
About how people got a lottery and then they had to get stoned by the community. That's social conformity. I don't remember it too much, but I just remember being like, damn, being stoned to death. That would have totally happened to me. And I just, it might have happened in a past life.
Yeah. That's why
we will not conform.
Yeah. All right. Well, those were my 2 social conformity.
I'd rather die.
All right.
What's that about? Like, we need to look into.
Dude, okay. Go to therapy ASAP. That's what all I'm hearing.
So
I'm gonna delve into all those behaviors of yours for sure. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell your therapist, like, pretend it's you and then have her give you some?
Oh, I talk about you all the time. I'm like, oh, Della, whoa. Didn't you said today again.
Have you quit the podcast yet? No, I freaking promised her I would finish till May. She's my cousin. I have to see her again. That's okay, Jessica. That's growth, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Those were mine. And I love social conformity and I love psychology because it would make me think of like during our education, we would always have to conduct experiments. And I remember when we chose like the group ours was to like do social conformity ones. And right, there's a bunch of other ones, but I love social conformity. And that's why I love talking about it, because it's interesting how we are by numbers.
And it just explains so much behavior. Like fan behavior, I never understood. That's a huge social conformity movement. You know, like if you're like in your family, did you know you like the Raiders because your dad liked the Raiders and you conformed, which is it's not like a bad thing. Correct. And then, but I'm like, okay, but what's up with that group, right? That like just fan behavior. We hear about it a lot, like the bar fights, and it's just very common for fights to happen between like, you know, opposing fans. But do you know where that comes from?
Is it mob mentality?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, what the video that I saw, it says that it gives the illusion of community. But it does, right? Like wouldn't you say that? Like tailgating, like, oh, we're all gonna go, the family, like it produces that, like you're getting rewarded.
Correct.
For this behavior. And so the video that I was watching said it's an illusion because it's very exclusive. You know, like you have to behave a certain way. And what happens when we happen to date someone who doesn't go for the Raiders, right? Like there's that, and our family's not even that bad when we talk about sports fans, but still, right? There's that awkward moment where you're like, they like that. I don't even participate in that conversation anymore, but I used to. And what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I totally forgot that we were going to mention that soccer game in Mexico just recently, where 17 people died. And there are videos that were so graphic, I couldn't even finish watching them, where there were people literally tearing the other opposing team members apart. And that to me, that's a very extreme idea of social conformity, but nonetheless, it is that. It falls under that realm. They just grouped themselves and attacked individuals. And it's almost like looking at the animal world, right? Like going back to that idea. Like there was no reason to attack a person this bad, where 17 people lost their lives. And they weren't killed like humanely. It was like they were tearing people apart. They were smashing on people's heads, their necks. And it like boggles me, and it makes me almost sad, because that's a very extreme example of social conformity.
Yeah. And also like the common behavior, you got to assess the environment.
Correct.
It wasn't really shocking. It's horrible. I couldn't even watch it. I just read about it and I'm like, that's crazy. You know, like I can't. But it also isn't super surprising because these things happen, right? Because there is alcohol usually involved or other substances. And the type of substances you're going to take when you're going to a game, it's not weed. I mean, it might be, but that's not the one that's going to make you, yes, let's go Raiders or whatever. It's usually alcohol, right?
He stopped saying Raiders because Raider fans are not that bad. So let me cut you off right there.
Sports fans. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I'm just saying it's happened all across like different teams. It's not even, it isn't just the Raiders, of course.
Correct.
But even remember when the Dodgers had such a horrible rep for their fan base?
Yeah. They beat someone up so bad where like he cognitively is never going to be the same. He smashed his head. And that's why they're not allowed to tailgate anymore here at Dodger Stadium. And baseball's such a basic, like...
Yeah, you don't even get riled up.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. And poor guy. He was an opposing Giants fan. And he came out here. It happened right here at Dodger Stadium. And they beat him that bad, where he's forever in a wheelchair. He looks like he has cerebral palsy now because of how bad they cognitively, like, messed him up in his head. He'll never the same, like, there's videos of him. He has like a big scar on his head. He doesn't talk the same. He lost himself a little bit that day, which is really sad. So
and so you assess that behavior, and then you're in it's very cult-like when you're actually in the stadium and this is your home team. Forget about it, right? Or it's like the finals, or it's, you know, there's so many different things that go into it, and that environment I feel produces, because I used to one time I saw a bar fight, and it's still I don't like watching fights. They're too much for me. And So I saw a fight and it was just drunk sports fan, you know, whatever. And I'm like, I don't ever want to go into a sports bar. I don't ever need to be in that environment, because if someone's drinking and they're just, this is their personality type, and then, you know, you get your friends riled up because you got to have your friends back, right? Like there's that mob mentality creeping in where it's just like, you would have never acted this way, hopefully, if it wasn't for this environment that you created for yourself, right? Because that's the environment we enjoy as well. So
in that context of that setting. That's
that's a cool one for social conformity, because it's just like, it's Monday tomorrow, like it's not, you know, like we got to go back to work and now you just killed someone.
No,
like,
that's so crazy. I can't. And yeah, I've been an influence in Raider games. Remember when I got arrested? Yeah, that was.
Boy, do I. You were leading the mob that day. Fuck authority. I was like, it's kind of punk rock, so I get it, but I'm not drunk enough. Yeah.
I have more social conformity than I thought. I totally forgot. It's like I suppressed that Raider game.
You forgot it.
No, now I'm a changed person, you know? Did my time and I've changed.
Yeah, and I missed you when you were gone. Right here.
I know.
No one missed you more than me. Okay, we're almost done. So some solutions. Do you have solutions to social conformity?
Oh, my solution is never assume. I think that's like the biggest word I've got. And we've said it a few times, right? Like I assumed this was the line, so I just stood in it. We assumed this is the way things ran, so I just went along with it. So I would say my biggest solution is never assume. Ask questions.
Yes, that's a good one. So always like be a critical thinker is what that reminds me of. And then for me, let's say, for example, those experiments you were talking about, like going into the elevator and everyone's turned around, it just shocks you, right? Mentally, like you kind of enter a state of anxiety because you're like, I just want to get to work. Like I'm in a suit, like, right? Like that whole is like, what? It's in the morning. And so all of those things give you that little rush, like, fuck, what do? I need to conform, right? You just can't think straight. So slow down, like take a deep breath when you're questioning stuff, because you're not able to think straight. And that's why you're more likely to conform, right? Like I can see myself being tired, like over it, and then just walking in place and you're like, okay, like you're not even thinking, you're like, I guess we're all facing this way today, right? Like that can happen. Or I don't know, like during COVID, a lot of different behavior conformity things had to start to happen. And you're just kind of like, I got too much shit going on, I'll just put the mask on. Or I got, right? Like it's just different levels. Yeah. And then if, you know.
Yeah, social acceptance. You're right. Good point.
Yeah, social acceptance, which comes from awesome, because this is my third solution. Social acceptance, we're social beings. We thrive in like community settings. We thrive. We're bigger in numbers, right? There's a lot of positives that can come when we unite and we do it for good. And so the other solution is, if we know that we behave a certain way because we want to be accepted by our peers, whoever that is, it could be at work, our family, our partners, whatever it is, it's like whoever is meant to be in your life is going to accept you. So kind of try to tell yourself that. I feel like I'm different, you know, and everyone's different. And the people who I love and I'm so thankful for accept me like for who I am. And I don't really have to fall in line with, right? Like with certain behaviors. And it's like, we need to get more comfortable and more confident, because then we'll be able to question ourselves more. Like, why did I just do that? You know, and you're just going to catch it and you question it. Or why did that person just do that? There's always a reason. And
I like that, because this is a good example of recently, like, right, we're going to take Peace to Disneyland and I already know who you are. So I would never invite you to
we're bringing that up.
Yeah. I would never invite you to that social study, because I'm just like, no, I don't want to be around you. You're going to be so annoying. And I accept you for who you are, and you can stay at home while we take Peace.
And not only would you not invite me, I would never go. Yeah. Let's make that clear. But I wanted to ask for the cult of Disney adults, who is your god? Mickey Mouse. Do you guys all hail? Seriously, who's the god? Who's the leader?
You just don't get it. This
Yeah.
is why we don't talk about Disney because it's a trigger for me. And then it's like, I don't even like you as it is. So it's just like, don't talk about Disney or the Raiders. That's it.
I don't talk about the Raiders. Okay, but anyways, acceptance all around, because yes, I don't like certain things, but I think it's important. And sometimes we mess around too much where we cross that line and we shouldn't. And I've held myself accountable where you don't have to like something and you don't have to be a preacher about it, or you like something, again, you don't have to be a preacher about it. I used to do that with food justice. I used to be like, put that sugar down, you know, or whatever. And it's just like, I learned that you get a better reaction, you get more acceptance when you just do your thing, mind your business. And because nobody likes that, because now you're like, I don't conform to you, so conform to me. Like you're just doing the same,
the opposite
effect.
It's the same, but in a different perspective. Same
but different.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was our topic on social conformity. Yay!
Hope you liked
Thank
it.
you so much for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye. Let us know what you think about social conformity.